You just realized that you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other job sites. Indeed-sponsored jobs help you stand out and hire fast. With sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people that you want faster. And it makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Plus, with Indeed-sponsored jobs, there's no monthly subscriptions, no long-term contracts, and you only pay for results. How fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/BWN. Just go to Indeed.com/BWN right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/BWN. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. That's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
Welcome into another edition of the James Boyd Podcast. Of course, I am James Boyd, joined by Jim Ayello, my NFL editor. Jim, we are back amidst a relatively quiet offseason so far for the Colts, which I'll take after the seasons that I've had, on the beat thus far.
Not what I expected, right? Like, I kind of think we expected maybe a GM search and then, I guess maybe a head coaching search. And maybe we'd be talking more about the quarterback, but all three are coming back like you've written about. And so now it's just the defensive coordinator search. That's kind of the big newsy headline grabbing thing for the Colts right now as we all start getting into mock draft season as you hit today.
Absolutely. So just to kind of get a rundown of the show, we will talk about obviously the mock draft from the ever so talented Dane Brugler, as well as my mailbag, some of the questions I did not get to in the mailbag, and then as well as wrapping it up with some quick thoughts on the defensive coordinators. We have 5 confirmed interviews so far, and so we'll break those down and kind of go through some of those things as well. But to start off, as you mentioned, Jim, the mock draft, which, again, I don't know if Dane Brugler wants to run for mayor of Indianapolis, but he could probably do so right now with 100% approval rating because in his latest mock draft, he had the Colts taking Tyler Warren at number 14 in the first round. And obviously, we know how talented Tyler Warren is, and we know where the Colts' tight end deficiencies are. So what were your thoughts on seeing him marry the two?
Too easy. Too easy is my thought. I opened the mock draft, and I was like, yeah, that's what I thought. And again, I think he says it all in his little write-up here with, if you guys haven't read it, you should check it out. But he says the pairing is going to be pretty popular throughout the process. He's going to have Tyler Warren's going to have the testing numbers that we all know Chris Ballard loves. He loves his drafting his 99th percentile athletes. He's QB friendly. I think everybody's talked about this with the, we want to have Anthony Richardson throw or at least make more of the layup throws, and this is the kind of guy who makes those easier, right? He gets open, he understands how to read zones, he catches seemingly everything. Like, he seems, I am not a Penn State devotee and have watched every one of his games or anything like that, but I've watched quite a few of his highlights and seen some of his big plays, and he is very, very fun to watch. He would add an element to this team that they have been missing since Eric Ebron, really, I think, is kind of like that one Eric Ebron season with Frank Reich where he kind of took over for half the season. That's about the last time I can remember them having a dominant over-the-middle force. And even that, I think a lot of Colts fans might question me on, which is fair. But Jack Doyle, I think you said, was like the last Pro Bowl tight end they've had, but he wasn't really a dominant over the middle of force. He's more of a chain mover and an excellent blocker, kind of a do-it-all tight end. Great player, but not really what you'd be getting with Tyler Warren. I think the Colts, I wanted to bring this up with you because I was reading your story because you mentioned Brock Bowers. I still wonder if that's what Bauer was trying to trade up for when he was talking about moving up in the draft. And like, again, I'm not saying he tried super hard or what he offered or whatever, but I'm very curious if that's the thing. Even though now I think, that offseason is going to be remembered for what ifs, by the way.
Yeah,
almost getting Bowers, almost getting Snead, almost getting Danielle Hunter. So yeah, anyway.
Well, I mean, he looks like a genius not trading for Snead, so I'll give him that. Yeah. Snead did not have, a great season leaving Kansas City. But I will say, to your point about moving up, remember he did have the clip from, I believe it was Hard Knocks, where he tried to trade up with the Giants. And as we know, the Giants picked, I believe, in the top 10 or whatever it was. And
it was 6.
Number 6 and got Malik Neighbors. And so you got to wonder, was he trying to move up to get him? Like, I don't know if he moved to number 6 to get, Brock Bowers. But obviously, I'm sure there were some, at least murmurs in that war room, as they call it, on the first draft night to explore moving up for Brock Bowers, because as we see, he was a home run pick for whoever got him. I mean, the guy had a historic rookie season, first team All-Pro as a rookie, the best tight end in the league this year, and I think that's pretty undeniable. Yeah. And he did it with a cast of quarterbacks that aren't even that great. And so that lets you know. I mean, it was Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, I think Desmond Ridder took some snaps for them this past year.
Right.
These are not, guys who you expect to put up crazy QB numbers, yet he still had a great season, which I think it also speaks to how talented of a player he is and how talented some of these guys are. Like, good players, good receivers, good tight ends, they produce no matter what. And I think you saw that with just this past draft class. The 3 that come to mind for me are Bowers, obviously Malik Neighbors in New York, and then also Brian Thomas Jr. down there in Jacksonville, because it wasn't like Trevor Lawrence was there the entire season. He still had, an amazing rookie season. I believe it was 10 receiving touchdowns, 1,200 yards. Like, he was balling. And so to move it back to the Tyler Warren conversation, of course, the Colts would love to have a player produce like that in his rookie season, right? Go out there and ball out. But I think the biggest thing is just finding a competent receiving tight end, period. Whether it's drafting Tyler Warren, which I believe would be the easiest option because it's hard to go out there and, go get a guy who can produce for you. But I think Tyler will fit a lot of those needs and just give you somebody. He doesn't have to be a superstar in his first year, but he has to bring you something that you haven't had in years past. And just looking at the numbers, man, it's rough. Jim, I know you read my story, and I'm sure some of you all listening have read it as well. But when you have the second fewest receiving yards among tight ends in the league, when Brock Bowers has more yards, catches, and touchdowns combined than your top 4 not receivers, but tight ends, and Mo Alley Cox, Drew Ogletree, Colin Granson, and Will Mallory, that's a problem. And I think Ballard actually acknowledged that, and he said he has to go out there and get a target, a receiving target. He credited them for blocking well, but blocking isn't enough for this offense. Now, you need a blocking tight end for this offense for sure, to run the ball with Anthony and run the ball with JT, but a chain mover, man, you cannot overlook it. And as you alluded to, the last tight end, rather, that I believe had 400 receiving yards in a season was Jack Doyle in 2019. 400 receiving yards for a tight end isn't like crazy numbers.
No.
It's an okay season. And so to not even have that for the last 5 years is pretty damning of where the Colts offense has been. And again, if you're trying to give Anthony every possibility to succeed, you have to address that position, which I think Tyler Warren does. Last thing I'll say about Tyler, well, not last thing, but one of the things I want to kind of drive home with the point of is his versatility. Just looking at some of his tape, looking at some of the numbers, looking at what other people have said about him who have obviously, watched him or covered him a lot longer than, I have for the past month or so. It's the versatility in the route running, but also he has some experience at halfback, which I think could be interesting for the Colts to just utilize. Not saying he would be back there running the ball, but just having that ability to move around the field would be cool for Shane Steichen to probably toggle with and create certain matchups and looks to hopefully, create, as you say, more of those layup opportunities for Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, and looking at the top available tight ends in free agency, just because like in my stupid brain, I look at a draft, I'm like, tight end in the first round? You really want to spend a first round pick on a tight end?
Yeah, I feel the same way.
And so, I'm not trying to undersell the importance of the position. I think it is important. I do think Anthony Richardson could use it, but the problem for people like me is that I look at the free agent list and it's very unappealing. Guys like Juwan Johnson, Mike Gesicki, Zach Ertz, Tommy Tremble, Tyler Conklin, like none of these guys move the needle more than, the guys that you already kind of have on your roster. I'm sure some of these guys are definitely better players, but by how much, however many degrees, it probably doesn't make much of a difference to you. So I would, it definitely makes sense. It's a good tight end draft class. So I definitely think if the Colts are going to take one first, second, third round, that makes some sense. Let me go a different direction to you real quick. We were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. I think people haven't talked about this a lot. The underrated need of the offensive line. The offensive line played better toward the end. I think Chris Ballard mentioned that in his end of season press conference, and I think he's right. I'm not trying to talk him out of it, but they have a lot of questions. Bernard Ryman is going to be a free agent after next year. He's got one season left. Quentin Nelson obviously is your rock at left guard. You don't necessarily know what you're doing at center with Ryan Kelly. Maybe you end up pivoting full time to Bortolini. Will Fries was having a really good year before he had a pretty bad injury, and not necessarily know when he's going to come back and what he'll look like when he comes back. And then obviously the big kind of mystery, and I'm around the Colts right now, Braden Smith, which we're not going to get into what's going on with him. Only just to say is that he does have a big cap hit next year. It's around $20 million, and the Colts could get out of it with like a $3 million dead cap hit and save about $17 million almost. Again, I don't know what his situation is, but I do know that the Colts probably don't want to be counting on that.
I think that's
necessarily
fair.
Yeah, again, just to say that you don't want to count on, he's like, pencil him in as our, in marker or whatever, his starting right tackle. And you have Gonzalez, who played well too. But as I mentioned to you before, like, I think right when you're at the point where you're giving yourself that, I think we'll be okay at offensive line, that's when you draft offensive linemen. That's when you draft it. Because if you find out you're wrong, that derails the whole season, which Colts fans don't need reminding of after, the 2022 season where they played so poorly. I just think there's some good ones here. I mean, obviously, if you're looking at, Will Campbell went to the Dolphins one pick ahead in Dane's mock draft. There's a Armand Membu from Missouri, tackle guard at 11. Josh Simmons to the Bears. Like, there's a bunch of guys in this area that I think the Colts could consider, and I don't think Colts fans should underrate the importance of strengthening the offensive line. There were a lot of games where Anthony Richardson was under constant duress, and he does.
That is true. Yeah,
a lot of bad things, but one of the things he does really well is negate pressure by avoiding sacks. He's really, really good at that. However, it'd be nice if he didn't have to do it quite as much.
Yeah, to your point, and I probably have been too hard on Anthony without factoring in that element of it. He was under duress a lot this season.
A lot.
And I mean, even the tap out play was crazy because he threw a 318-pound guy off his back and basically ensures you don't lose 10 yards. And then obviously we know the fallout of the tap out. But I'm just saying, we kind of killed the guy for a lot of different things this year, being inaccurate, all these things. You're not helping his accuracy or his processing if he's constantly under duress. And he can get you out of some bad situations, but it also decreases his opportunities, probably his chances of completing the downfield passes, completing the passes that keep the chains moving when he's just constantly under stress. And obviously, to survive as a quarterback in the NFL, you need to be able to make those, bad plays, good plays, and the great ones always kind of bend the game to their will and make it right, even when their team might be wrong in a call or protection. But as you said, I mean, when you look at some of these games where you're getting pressured at a super high rate, I want to say a couple of them was over 40%.
Yeah,
it's like, how can you reasonably expect him to develop or sustain or have success? So while it's not the sexy pick, Tyler Warren, I think, is the sexy pick. And also keep in mind, would he drop that far? Now, I'm not saying he's Brock Bowers 2.0, but he's certainly going to be coveted by other teams as well. So I have to see if that's even the case. But I do think that, again, bolstering that offensive line, kind of reassuring yourself about that isn't necessarily a bad move. And then as you alluded to with Braden Smith, we don't know. Like, we just don't know his future. And that's just the bottom line. And even before this personal issue that took him out of the last few games of the season. He was battling through some knee stuff, and I think it's fair to say he may not be 100% again for the rest of his career as far as how his body feels. Even Ryan Kelly said that for himself with his knee. He's like, I don't know if I'll ever be the same. I think that's a fact you have to kind of think about. And while you want to get cheaper in some areas, obviously they have a very expensive offensive line. If you look at last year's payroll, you want to get cheaper in some areas, but you can't get cheaper to the expense of just running people out there who may not be ready for it, because as it stands now, like you said, relying on Tanner Bortolini, Matt Gonzalez, and, kind of a question mark at right guard with Will Fries, like all those guys kind of get it together, play well all at once in a make it or break it year for, Anthony Richardson. That's tough. That's tough. And so some of the other names that were popped up when I asked this question on Twitter, thank you all for participating, about, okay, who would you take if it wasn't Tyler Warren? I got a couple of Warren Tylers because people were just like, forget you, James. We're sick of, alternatives and plan Bs. Just tell Ballard to get it done. And I'm like, well, that's not how the real world works, my friends. Like you only get to have, well, I'll put it like this. You only get to have a plan A when you're picking number one. That's it. Like you never know beyond that. Even if you're picking number two, you just don't know for 100%. You don't have all the cards. But I will say one of the biggest names that I kind of agree with was Malachi Starks from Georgia. Okay. Like if he were to drop, would you go get him at safety? And you do need safety help. I don't know if you bring Julian Blackman back because of the injuries. He's a free agent as well. Do you go get a guy who can help your defense right now? Beyond that, they had a few other players like, we had, I'm looking at some of the responses. We had an Ashton Genty comment. I'm like, I don't know. I think that would lead to, West 56th Street being burned down. So I wouldn't recommend going get a running back at 14, even though he's a great player. I've seen linebacker Jalen Walker from Georgia. Would you invest in him? Would he be somebody to kind of bolster that linebacker room for you, assuming that EJ Speed isn't brought back? It's probably got good size, good speed. So that's something to consider as well. But I mean, this draft class to me, isn't loaded with a bunch of to me, just you have to have it guys. And of course that probably is some of just naivety, but not that great as far as quarterbacks and some of the wide receivers I'm seeing. Like it's not a super loaded wide receiver class from what I understand. One of the wide receivers that was brought up by some of the listeners was Emeka. I hope I say his last name right.
Ibuka from Ohio State.
I think
Ibuka. Yeah.
So. Like, would you take him? And it's like I probably wouldn't take a wide receiver in the first round, mainly because like we talked about previously, Jim. I think that they've sort of solidified that room to a certain degree.
I think it's the first time in years where I would be like, I don't even think receivers should be on the table in the first round. I really don't. I think they're good enough. I think you're good enough. I'm not saying they're elite or top 10, whatever. They're good enough. They have enough to win. Alec Pierce's development, combined with I think Josh Downs' development and the health you would hope for Michael Pittman. I think between those three things, you got enough. You got enough talent there. Can I ask you? Let me zoom out though, real quick on the draft, and instead of just doing like players, you're Chris Ballard, right? And your every instinct is telling you to draft a mediocre edge rusher in the first round. No, just kidding. It was a joke. It was a joke, but kind of true.
Yeah, it's kind of true. Yeah, right.
Your future pretty much depends on whether Anthony Richardson succeeds or not. Pretty much. And I know the defense needs the rebound, and we'll talk about defensive coordinator in a little bit. But I gotta say, if I'm Chris Ballard, and I'm pretty sure I'm tied to the fate of Anthony Richardson, I'm pretty sure I'm doing what I can to make his life easier. And is that a tight end, an offensive lineman? I don't think running back probably doesn't make sense to me. And then receiver, like I just said, I don't think they need another one in the first round. That'd kind of just be an abundance of riches. You still have A.D. Mitchell, we didn't even mention. I was just curious. Like, do you think, not that he has to go offense, but that he should be leaning offense in this draft?
Yeah, he probably should lean towards the offense, in my opinion. Now, I do think he has to address other positions. Like, linebacker, safety, cornerback in
For
later
sure.
rounds, but just that first pick, yeah. If I'm feeling any type of pressure, I'm trying to make Anthony's life easier. And like you said, I don't know if you need. You can always use another wide receiver, but I don't know if you need one. Mainly because you got to get somebody to give him the ball too. Like keep in mind,
Right,
Anthony
right.
isn't like the greatest, distributor of the rock. He's not the greatest passer in the league. He's not Matthew Stafford out there. The other night I think he delivered like passes to 9 different receivers. That just isn't Anthony's game. And so
You get 9 completions from Anthony Richardson. You're on a good
nah,
start.
for
Off to a
real.
good start.
Like it's we've seen some rough games, some interesting games as well.
Yeah.
And also you've seen some great ones where they just ran it all over the Titans. So you got to
sure.
give and take there. But yeah, I think that's a logical way of thinking about it. And again, the question that we've had for Ballard and the existential question he's had over his tenure is like, what are you going to do different? And this will be something different because in years past, he has taken swings on more like, to me, like project type players.
Yeah.
Anthony was a project. Kwity Paye was a project.
Dio was coming off an injury. I know second round, but yeah.
Exactly. But like he's had that tendency. And then you look at what's available, you probably want to get, and that's what Dane said actually in his mock draft, which I really appreciate. I was like, man, Dane's locked in. The last line of his little Tyler Warren blurb, he says, let's be real. This regime, meaning the Colts regime, must draft players who will help win games immediately.
Yep.
And so to me, that doesn't mean, oh, this guy could be this player. He needs to be that player right now. And so, again, that's probably why a lot of people are leaning towards Tyler Warren based off the team needs, his production, his season. And also, he's huge. I mean, he's 6'6", like 6'6" guy. I want to say he's like 6'6", 260 or something like that. So he's got some range, some size, and he can definitely move. And so I think that would definitely help the Colts because at some point you need a guy who can just get open over the middle, a huge target, and just make the chains keep moving. That to me is paramount to helping Anthony succeed, mainly because you, like I said, you don't have a lot of time left to try to develop guys. I can't depend on Anthony to elevate a player. Like you kind of need other players to elevate him a little bit and to make his life easier. So
that's why I'm leaning more toward. That's why I'm leaning more toward O-line, man. I said I pulled up the numbers on him. He was second in among pressure rate, 38.7% according to Pro Football Focus. The only one ahead of him was Jalen Hurts facing more pressure. And again, I there is some validity to the idea that he hung on to the ball too long, that he creates some of his own pressure. I get that. I definitely do. I understand that. But I do think that, you see Sam Darnold in here at 6, Brock Purdy in here at 5. Not surprising. These are guys that are playing for offensive coordinators who kind of have longer developing routes, attacking downfield a little bit more often. That's definitely Sam Darnold this year, and definitely Anthony Richardson this year. They try to throw deep a lot. So obviously Shane Steichen can do a little bit more to help him negate some of that pressure by getting rid of the ball a little bit faster. But I kind of think the Colts have to be cognizant of the offensive line. The old Jim Harbaughism here is offensive line is the only thing you can draft that really helps everyone, right? Like this is going to help. You draft an offensive lineman who's good. He helps the run game. He helps the pass game. He's going to make your quarterback's life easier. I'm weirdly leaning that direction, despite the fact that I think they have bigger needs. Because I want to make sure, again, if I'm at Chris Ballard, I want to do everything I can to make sure that there are no excuses on Anthony Richardson. His protection wasn't good enough. He didn't have enough weapons. I don't want any of that. I want everything in place so I can do my evaluation in year 3. And if he gets hurt, then the evaluation's pretty much over. If he doesn't deliver, the evaluation's pretty much over. Like, we got it. We know our answer. We got to move on. But I don't want excuses, and therefore I think bolstering the offensive line is something they should at least consider, given where they are with some of these younger guys and some of the contracts that they have expiring.
So question for you to consider, Mr. Ayello, because you threw it out there to me. Would you trade the number 14 pick to go get a win-now player, probably on defense, like he did in 2020, I believe, when he traded the number 13 pick, Ballard that is, for DeForest Buckner?
That trade aged really, really well. That was probably one of his signature moves of his tenure. Obviously, getting DeForest Buckner was awesome, and I believe the 49ers drafted Javon Kinlaw with that pick, and he did not go on to have a very productive career. So yes, I think you consider it, but I think I don't want to speak out of both sides of my mouth, to be honest with you. I think you're probably right that if he moves that pick, it's for a defensive player, because if you just run through what's realistic on the offensive side of things, nobody trades offensive linemen almost ever. I mean, they're very rarely traded.
That's true.
You get, the occasional Trent Williams, Laramie Tunsil's of the world, but very rare. Quarterback, running back, no. We just talked about why you're not gonna invest a first round pick in a receiver via trade or via draft. I don't think. And again, I don't think there are tight ends out there that you trade a first round pick for, or at least if there are, then they're not being traded. So it is the defensive side of the ball. I definitely think he explores the idea of adding an impact player via trade, because I think he wants to add. I think when he added DeForest Buckner, it was more than just how good the player was. It was that he was coming from this Super Bowl pedigree. The guy probably would have won. He could have won Super Bowl MVP if the 49ers had hung on to win that game. He was that good that game, that disruptive, was all over Patrick Mahomes in that game for almost the entire day. It was an incredible performance. But he brought that championship pedigree to the Colts and to the locker room, and that immediate, he was the highest paid player, and you want to pay guys like that. He was like the highest paid player. He was one of their best player. He was a guy that demanded excellence and expected excellence from his teammates. It was all the things you wanted when you traded for a guy like that. If there's somebody out there like that, yeah, I think he's got to explore it. But I don't want, I go back to what I said right at the beginning. I don't want to talk out both sides of my mouth. I think most of your significant resources this offseason have to be dedicated probably to the offensive side of the ball, to making sure Anthony Richardson succeeds. And if he doesn't, then you set up the next guy.
That is true. I do think that at this point, when you hire a new defensive coordinator, there's probably going to be some grace there to figure things out and change things around. And honestly, I don't want to speak for every Colts fan, but I do think that if the offense was significantly better, if Anthony took a significant step forward as a playmaker and showed that he's a legitimate quarterback in the NFL and future potential franchise guy, then I think they would be pleased with that and still yell about the defense side of the ball. But if Anthony is right, if they get Anthony corrected, if he's the dude, he starts looking kind of like how Bryce Young looked towards the end of this past season, then look, Chris Ballard, whatever, you got the quarterback right, you're fine. As far as everyone else as well. I will say, though, some of the names that, again, listeners threw out via Twitter.
Yes, they were interesting. I agree with
Sauce
that.
Gardner. Yeah. Max Crosby was one that was interesting.
Listen, I love Max Crosby, so yes, 100%. If you can get it, but there's no way. There's no way.
There's no way he would do that.
Yeah.
Well, that was one. Another player, Jair Alexander. I was like, I don't know about that. Coming off an injury, a little older as a cornerback. But again, those are things you have to think about, going into the and again, do I expect this to happen, a trade? No, probably not. I know Chris Ballard was asked this year in press conference, do you anticipate making a more desperate move? And he was like, no, I won't hamstring this franchise for 3 to 4 years, which is kind of him to say, because I wouldn't care. I'd be thinking like, look, this might be my last crack at this.
Save my job.
Yeah, but maybe he doesn't feel like he needs that safety net or that blanket. But here's what I'll leave it at this. We can move on to some of the other mailbag questions. But my biggest thing is like, what are you going to do that's different? Whether it's, via the draft, via free agency, potential trades, whatever, obviously one of the bigger questions, who you bring in for competition with Anthony, all of those things. What are you going to do different to potentially get different results? Because if you run it back or do the same things, it makes everything you said during your press conference invalid, and also just kind of remind us of your middling resume, 8 years going into 9 years now. So we'll see. I'll kind of leave it at that now. Jim, I did but I wanted to do a mailbag this week. It's kind of an easy way to gauge where the fan base is, hit a bunch of different topics as well. And we got some interesting questions. I know we talked at length about Anthony and others so far, but the one thing I wanted to hit on, and you brought it up, was the Lions question, which was an awesome question.
It was a good question.
Yeah, it was a good question. It was something that definitely made me think. It was the Lions, and also we can hit on the Commanders as well. That was another interesting question. Somebody asked about, could the Colts kind of follow the same plan? But for those who haven't seen the story, essentially the question was, hey, in 2023, the Lions defied draft logic and they drafted, their first 4 picks were a running back, an off-ball linebacker, a tight end, a nickel, and a safety. And this is from Tristan S. on The Athletic. Thank you, Tristan, for submitting the question. And we both were like, wait a second, this wasn't like, the draft haul that they got or their initial draft haul that changed things. It was kind of like the finishing touches of a couple of years of making some really good moves. One of them trading for Jared Goff, so they got the quarterback situation squared away 2 years before that draft. And then I'll let you take it away as far as that 2022 draft that features some good guys and some players that may or may not be difference makers. Like Aiden Hutchinson and Jamison Williams and others.
Yeah, I understood the question, and I get what it was. Is that they were criticized, I think, for
the Jahmyr Gibbs pick was definitely criticized.
Yeah, same with Jack Campbell. Honestly, like those guys were, and Brian Branch is a safety / like a nickel corner, so it was a 2nd round pick. But I think they were criticized for targeting non-premium positions, and fairly. I mean, I guess, but because you definitely typically want to use your higher end assets to target premium positions. It's not only for what you get on the field in terms of talent, it's cost savings. If you can get a cheap, effective pass rusher, a cheap, effective receiver, that saves you more money in the long run because you're getting, X amount of production out of a cheaper player. But
exactly
to your point, those were the finishing moves Brad Holmes was sprinkling on this team. Like you said, he already had the quarterback, but yeah, Penei Sewell. I mean, this was a team that had a chance to draft Jamar Chase with that pick in the 1st round. And they took Penei Sewell instead. They drafted,
and it wasn't the wrong pick.
No,
that's what's crazy. Like Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
They still didn't make the wrong pick, which is awesome for them to say. Seriously,
it's incredible. No, it's incredible. I mean, but you got a change. You got a kind of a culture setter, change maker at offensive lineman with Penei Sewell. They drafted Aleem McNeil on the interior, which you can argue is maybe not premium, but still a very, very good interior player. But then they drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown in that same draft in the 4th round. He ends up becoming a huge, massive hit. But as you pointed out, the next season, Aiden Hutchinson, pass rusher, 2nd overall pick. Jamison Williams, they traded up from, I think, 28 or 30 with the Vikings to go get Jamison Williams and try to get another impact player to premium position wide receiver. Josh Pascal, again, hasn't been an impact player, but an impact position playing defensive end. So they definitely did their work at the premium positions. I mean, their offensive line is one of the best in football. That's why they can do what they can do. I mean, they kind of went cheap at first at running. David Montgomery didn't cost them a ton of money when they first got him to add him behind a great offensive line. They traded away TJ Hawkinson, a weapon, again, to stash more draft picks because they wanted to target other premium positions, not TJ Hawkins. So again, I really like the idea of the question, but you have to go back a little bit further and see what the Lions were doing to try to build and set a culture and set a tone. And shockingly, starts in the trenches, right? A guy like Dan Campbell, it's not that surprising, but it started in the trenches. They built a kick-ass offensive line, and that's how they generally maul people. They can do other things, but that's typically how they're mauling people, is with that awesome offensive line. And then that was the plan on the defensive line, too. This year, obviously, with Aiden Hutchinson going down, it's been a little bit different. They've been good, but they haven't been quite as good. So, yeah, no, that's building from the inside out. I know everyone says it seems like a cliche. It works. It works.
Yeah, you got to win in the trenches. I mean, we really see it all the time in college football as well. It's like when 2 really talented teams face each other, the skill position players are usually, pretty even. And you can see that in a lot of, even group of 5 schools. But it's like when you start facing the Alabamas, the Georgias, I'll throw Indiana in there just to ruffle some feathers as well. The Indianas of the world, others seriously that have the guys in the trenches. Even Notre Dame, just watching some of the stuff that they were able to do in the college football playoff, it's like at some point, just the weight difference and the way you're able to move people in the trenches matters. And just bring it full circle with NFL. I mean, look at what the Vikings were under, the pressure they were under when they faced the Rams. Their interior offensive line had been a problem basically all year. They were able to get away with it, work around it when they faced, juggernaut teams. And granted, the Vikings lost to some great opponents this year. I think they only lost to
It was just the Lions and Rams.
Yeah, so it's like,
Yeah.
not terrible teams by any means, but
Yeah.
those trenches matter. Your quarterback can't succeed when obviously he held onto the ball too long sometimes with Sam Darnold, but he was under duress all night and got sacked a ton of times, and it's because that offensive line oftentimes just couldn't hold up. So I'm with you there, Jim, when it comes down to building the trenches first and kind of building out inside out. Now, other questions we got to ask from Ben L. If Richardson continues to struggle with injuries next season, does that buy Steichen and Ballard more time? No. I don't think it should buy either of the three. I shouldn't say either because either means two things, but any of the three another year. No, I think if Anthony is injured again next year, you have to move on at that point. 3 years is enough of a sample size, whether it's a sample size of injuries or his play or whatever, to decide if he's your guy moving forward. And same with coach, GM. I kind of look at all of them as a package deal. So if you move on from one of them after this season, you might want to just reset with everything. Because keep in mind, Steichen and Ballard brought Anthony to Indianapolis. They bet on him. They bet on his future. They bet on his talent. They bet on all these things. And if it doesn't work out because he's banged up again, hey, man, that is a scenario where they could lose their jobs. And it's happened to other people. Like, I never want to seem like I'm advocating for anybody to lose their job. I'm just saying, you look around the league, it's not like this is, it would be some terrible, there would be some egregious mistake to move on from them. Teams do it all the time when there's a workout from an injury standpoint. The last thing I'll do, and again, you all are free to check this out. The last one I want to hit, which I thought was interesting, was the question from Anonymous U. Shout out to Anonymous U, who comments on a lot of the stories, anonymously, of course. What'd you think of just the whole, hey, Washington turned it around, why can't the Colts do it? Because I heard this not only from this person, but from a few people, especially after the doinked field goal. And it's so funny because it's like if he misses that field goal, the Washington Commanders lose. They still haven't won a playoff game since 2006 or whatever it was. Then the narrative isn't as strong. But they did change things around pretty quickly. But maybe you can kind of break down, Jim, just for our listeners who may not be as plugged in, just how much change that franchise went under to get to where they are now, where, it feels like the future's so bright with Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, all the change, the most change. That's like you can't. I mean, it's a total reset, which almost no franchise gets to do. I think a lot of franchises
from the owner down.
That's what I mean. Like I, as you guys we've talked about, one of the teams that I help cover and edit for is the Giants. A lot of fans would love for the Giants to get new ownership. A lot of fans would love for the Jets to get new ownership. I think
the Colts probably in that same conversation. I would say honestly, seriously.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah, like I said, there's a long list of teams that would love to do a full and total reset. I will say it was a short list of teams that truly needed it because their ownership was such a disaster, and Washington was high up on the list, obviously with Dan Snyder.
And keep in mind, real quick, that he was like forced out. It wasn't like he bowed out gracefully. Like he was forced out because of some terrible workplace allegations and things like that. I'll let you continue, but just the context there. It wasn't like he was like, you know what? Yeah, I hear the fans. I'm just not cut out to be the guy. Like, no owner ever really gives up control unless it's for reasons like that, or if they unfortunately pass away. So you usually stuck with your owner for as long as they want to be there, and every owner wants to be there forever. I'll let you continue.
No, it just starts at the top. I mean, you said it. They brought in a new owner, a successful one, who'd done things in sports ownership before, so that was good for them. Then they brought in a new head coach. Then they brought in a new offensive coordinator. Then they brought in a new quarterback. And obviously, I think the other thing that you were right about the kick. If that doesn't go in, we're talking about them differently. If Jaden Daniels isn't Jaden Daniels, we're not talking about the Commanders like some like model franchise for a rebuild.
If the Bears don't allow a Hail Mary, do they even make the playoffs? Like, this is the question we have to ask. But he needs to play. He's a baller. I've enjoyed watching Jaden Daniels.
He's incredible.
I'll let you continue. But yes, there are so many factors that go into it, and which I think, Jim, and maybe you can speak more on this, just having watched the NFL, you got to be a little bit lucky, right? I mean,
yeah,
Jaden Daniels was highly rated, obviously, coming out of college. But, I mean, if we knew what he would be now, he'd probably be the consensus number one pick.
Yeah, or the Bears would have taken him. If they had a full year of watching these two guys play in the NFL, the Bears would have taken him number one, no doubt about it. One thing I really wanted to go over real quick though, because I think that's a lot of the obvious stuff that they did, and it's the most important stuff.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I think as it relates to the Colts that I think we should talk about is some of the free agents that they did add, which was a lot of free agents. First of all, they added a ton of free agents and reset the culture. I think the one that gets the most headlines is Bobby Wagner playing defense. And again, championship pedigree, having played in Seattle all those years, and brought an understanding of Dan Quinn's defense to a lot of these young guys. But look around at who else they added. They added Tyler Biotish, an experienced center. That's huge for, again, maybe not an awesome player, but huge for a rookie quarterback. Came from Dallas, a team that's been to the playoffs, won 12 games a year for years. Doris Armstrong also came from Dallas, played under Dan Quinn's defense, like a guy who's really, really good. Frankie Louvu, if you watch Derek Klassen's Goblins series he's been doing on guys, the guy's a maniac, but they brought him in to kind of change the culture on defense and had some good years there. Jeremy Chin, people love him around here in Indianapolis. Like, again, not to say he was awesome in Carolina, but plays with a certain mentality.
He was one of the guys that Colts fans wanted at safety.
Yeah. Austin Eckler, just an all-around good dude. I know, again, played with the Chargers, but is a really good player. People really love him. He's a good locker room guy. Like, I'm going through the list. Zach Ertz, championship pedigree with the Eagles. Like, they brought in player after player after player who had either is known as a good guy, had championship pedigree, or both, and helped reset the culture. Exactly. They produced and they helped reset the culture in Washington. So, again, from the top on down change, but then some really, really smart additions by the new GM, Adam Peters, in terms of just being like, this is a new team. This is Dan Quinn's team. We're bringing in guys, high character guys who can still produce, which is important. You don't want to just bring in high character guys for no reason. High character guys who can still produce and play a certain way. And I think they all buy into what Dan Quinn's selling. They all buy into what Jaden Daniels did. And this is what you get. This is the kind of season and kind of turnaround you can get when all of those things happen at the same time. Really, really, really hard to replicate, but very cool what they did.
Yeah, and so if you do want to take something from that blueprint, I think the message here will be spend some money, man. Go out and get some guys that can be different.
These guys weren't expensive either. They weren't that expensive.
Like, you don't have to go out and get, grade A free agents, but you can get some B guys to help you go win. And again, it doesn't have to be the long contracts. It could be for a year. It could be a stopgap. And they've done it in the past. I mean, Rodney McLeod was a great stopgap at safety a couple of years ago for the Colts. And obviously the 2022 season was a disaster, but he played great. Like, if they had him this past season, he probably makes a difference. And so you need guys like that who can come in and make a difference. And so we'll see again if Chris Ballard is for real when it comes to adding talent via free agency and creating more of that healthy stress is what he called it, I think, when it comes to your spot possibly being taken or just having more competition in general because your team's trying to get better, as DeForest Buckner is basically begging the franchise to do. Go out and get guys to compete, to raise the level of competition, to push us in a new direction. And so we'll see how that goes out. Now, to wrap things up here, we will hopefully hear something in the next few weeks or so. It could be tomorrow, could be, a month from now, who knows? With the defensive coordinator search, there are 5 confirmed people so far. We have Dennis Allen, Lou Anarumo. We also have Wink Martindale. I'm blanking on 2 more. Is it Ephraim Banda? Is that how you say his name? From the Browns. And then, so obviously, I mean, these are all significant names to remember. And why am I blanking on the last person? We had Wink, we had Dennis, we had Lou.
Steve Wilkes.
Steve Wilkes. Yeah, Steve Wilkes, longtime NFL coordinator. Sorry, I should have had that list ready for you. But nevertheless, those are the 5 defensive coordinators that have confirmed searches with the Colts. And I think there's a constant theme there, Jim, that you can expand on. But I think the biggest one is that, we're probably going to see a lot more teams move away from, or at least the next defensive coordinator here, move away from some of the cover 3 stuff we saw with Gus Bradley, which allowed a lot of underneath and what I call like free completions and free yards to opposing quarterbacks. You're muted.
Sorry.
Oh,
it definitely seems like they're looking to move away from I guess still recovering from the flu, so I was muting myself for coughing. They're looking to move away from some of the I think it's not even necessarily cover 3. I mean, I was going through a lot of the coverage breakdowns 2 days ago, just kind of looking at some of these DCs, and a lot of these guys play cover 3. A lot of them play a lot of cover 3. No one plays it to the extent that Gus Bradley plays it, and so I think what they're looking for is somebody a little less predictable. And
probably some more variety is probably the best term that I would say could be used because Gus was very much kind of rigid in what we expected him to do, and they also just didn't blitz, enough. At least I don't know if I. Let me rephrase that. They didn't blitz to a level that perhaps they should have or could have to generate more pressure, and maybe that's something they want to move on from as well.
I just don't think you have enough answers when you're dead set on you're going to play cover 3, and if you're maybe not getting pressure with 4, and there's no pivot then, because if you're not getting the pressure with 4, even if you're running some stunts or games or you're doing some simulateds, like I don't think Gus Bradley did enough of that kind of stuff necessarily to offset those games where they weren't getting pressure with 4. So now you're going to guy like all these guys are obviously slightly different than each other. I can't say that they're all the same, but Lou Anarumo is really known as more of a week to week kind of guy. Like he will change his defense to do the thing that he thinks is best to stop you that week. Obviously, he struggled with that quite a bit this year. I think a lot of that has to do with personnel that they had, but I mean, rightly criticized for his failings the last year and a half or so for what happened in Cincinnati. But Wink Martindale is hyper aggressive. If you want pure blitzing, like that's what he's going to bring for you. A lot of man to man. You and I were talking about a lot of these guys are going to play a lot of cover 1 because they want to play man and they want to do weird exotic things with that. Like, you have single high safety and you're playing man to man. You can kind of do some weird exotic stuff with that extra dude that you can play with a little bit. Steve Wilkes is a guy that will change. He'll do a little bit of different things depending on his personnel. Banda's kind of a mystery to me. If he's a Schwartz guy, I kind of know what to expect, but I obviously don't know from him. And Dennis Allen, I will say to me, this is just my personal opinion, that's a huge win if the Colts get him as their defensive coordinator. But I do think if it's Dennis Allen, they might be waiting a while. I think a lot of these soon-to-be head coaches,
I was going to say, yeah,
are recruiting Dennis Allen, frankly, or would want somebody like Dennis Allen. His defense is in New Orleans. I know he didn't get a bad rap. He deserved what happened into the Saints as a head coach. He didn't perform well. They didn't win enough, and he got fired, and rightly so. But that guy is a hell of a defensive coordinator, man. He does some really, really interesting stuff and had those defenses playing really well for a long time when they were a little younger and a little healthier at certain spots. So I really like the idea of Dennis Allen coming in, and there would not be complacency, I don't think, under Dennis Allen. That's what I'll say about him.
No, not at all. I think that he's known kind of for being a hard-nosed guy, a no-nonsense type of guy. You probably want some of that. And then also, the thing that we talked about as well is they've looked at, outside of Banda, it's experience with these guys.
Yeah.
Like a lot of coaching experience. Some of them have been head coaches. They've been in Shane Steichen's shoes. And so maybe that's something that they still would like to kind of carry over from the Gus Bradley era, where Gus had a lot of experience as a head coach, obviously, as a defensive coordinator, things like that. So that could be useful. And again, the thing I'm interested in as well is just how the marriage will be with Shane. I know that Wink Martindale rubs people the wrong way in New York. Would he be, I don't know, easier to work with in Indianapolis after being out of the NFL for a little bit? Like, would that be something that he's more open to, or would the conflict be good for Shane or the team? I don't know. Something to consider for sure. But that's basically it when it comes to the DC search. Not a lot of fireworks right now. Not a lot of buzz, I would say. I've reached out to a few people around the Colts and haven't heard too much back right now. And like you said, some of this could be due to just, how the search works out. And sometimes these can get drawn out when it comes to coaches that are, like you said, joining new staffs or weighing their other options. I mean, obviously, you would imagine that the Colts might even want to interview a few other defensive coordinators if they get the chance. And so it just depends on, how that all shakes out. But that's pretty much it for now. I hope you all enjoyed our sort of filler episode. We enjoyed it as well. I definitely liked all the questions for the mailbag. To those of you who trolled me, bravo, because some of these were hilarious. I was like, I can't answer these questions because these are not appropriate for work. But I appreciate the humor nonetheless. And I know, Jim, you appreciate some of that as well, some of the banter that we have from fans. So that's all we have for now. We'll check in soon. Be on the lookout, I would say, next week for some free agency, thoughts, opinions. I know some of you all asked me about that on the previous mailbag, and I didn't get to it because I figured I'd just make it into a big piece. Hey, who stays, who goes, here's my predictions, that sort of thing. So as always, from Jim and myself, thanks for listening, and we'll catch up with you all very soon.
Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated. forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.